right. Welcome to the Bryce Eddy Show. So today my guest is Scott Jones. Scott runs a podcast I was on called Give and Take not too long ago, and we're doing a little show exchange because I had so much fun with this guy. He and I disagree on some things, and it's tough to get guys that we disagree with on, especially from the left. But I think Scott's just a liberal, and liberals and I can get along. So how are you, Scott?
Bryce, I can do more push-ups than any leftist, In fact, Saturday, I take time off from the weights on the weekends, and so I do like a push-up jump rope workout. I did like 200 push-ups intermittent by jump rope. So that means,
well, you can't be far left then.
Well, look, I'm looking to
because you got some testosterone. Then
I'm calling Pete Hesgath. I should be a flag admiral. Get these fat ass admirals out and put me in. Put me in, man. I should be a flag officer with the amount of push-ups I'm doing.
Hey. So I'm going to put a little pin in that because I want to ask you what your thoughts are on that. But first, tell the audience, what you're doing, how you got into the podcasting world. Just give us a quick bio background and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I've been podcasting since like 2015, maybe, or no, before that even, I think.
Oh wow, that's ancient in the podcast world.
So I had a friend. I still have a friend. He's a pastor. He's a pastor of a UCC church. I like to tease him. I call that Unitarians Considering Christ. He's not denominational at UCC, but he's pastoring the church up there in Vermont. And he's Reformed, but he is up there. And years ago, we were talking about a podcast I listened to religiously, a guy named Paul Zoll, who a lot of guys in the Gospel Coalition and stuff follow that guy. But he's a sort of evangelical Episcopalian. I loved his podcast. And my friend Bill said, why don't we start a podcast? And I thought about it, and I said, sure, let's try it. And we started a podcast called New Persuasive Words. That podcast is 370 some odd episodes in. Then I started actually doing another podcast for a group called Mockingbird. It's sort of an evangelical-ish, mainline-ish, a very grace-oriented organization. They really think that the gospel has been damaged by legalism and law-oriented Christianity, and their passion is to get grace back into Christianity. So they hired me actually to do their podcast, which I did for a couple of years, year and a half, 2 years. And that's where I started interviewing people. And I didn't realize I would love doing that. I actually thought that it actually became one of my favorite things to do podcasting wise. And so I started, after I left that organization, I started my own long form interview show called Give and Take, where I do, that's just had episode 300 recently. And you were like my 303rd or 4th guest. So yeah, so that show, I talk to all kinds of folks. I talk to folks, I talk to sometimes religious folks, but most of my guests are not religious. Most of them are novelists or sociologists or political pundits or philosophers and stuff like that. Journalists. I just had Carl Malden, the actor, famous actor. His daughter was just on. She wrote a time travel romance novel. And so I have all sorts of different folks from across the cultural and political spectrum on there. Had you on there, you were a guest that got rave reviews, even from people on the left, my friend. In fact, I had a very nice conversation with someone who is a pretty liberal Democrat in New York. She's in Brooklyn, and she's a very successful publicist. And, her kids have been into Charlie Kirk and Andrew Tate and stuff. And so she's trying to figure all that out. And so she loved listening to our conversation because she thought, man, I just don't have a lot of friends like you that are on the left and are religious and can talk to conservatives. And so she really was sends her compliments and thought that the conversation was actually really helpful to her.
That's great. Well, I had a blast with you, and I think it's super useful, super important, especially in the time that we're in where we are so divided and there is a threat of political violence. And I want to ask you about that in a little bit too. But I mean, things are so heated, so gnarly that you have, family members not talking to each other. The divide means that we are isolating, from each other if we don't, agree politically on things. And I think that's absurd. I grew up in an environment where we kind of liked to argue and disagree about things. And it was how we tested our knowledge and our positions. And sometimes we just argued the other side for fun. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's healthy, and things have been hijacked by a lot of the fringe, extreme. I would posit that mostly on the left, but you might disagree there. But I think that you and I having a friendship and talking about things and talking about it even sometimes aggressively, and advocating for our positions, is how we shape the minds of others, so
It's
that they
funny
know
too
why
when
they
you say
believe.
that. There's a guest I'm having on tomorrow who's a guy from if your viewers can see this, James Fishkin. He's from Stanford, and the book is "Can Deliberation Cure the Ills of Democracy?" And he does deliberative democratic labs, basically, where he gets people from all across the spectrum to deliberate and ask and dialogue. And he finds that actually we're not as divided as we think. When you get in these
I agree.
deliberative, intentional conversations, there's a lot more agreement that and that we have people that make money. Tom Friedman made this point on Bill Maher last week, and he said we've always had our issues, but we've never been so divided intentionally by people that make money from it.
Yeah.
Right? That there are algorithms that just that are programmed to get us fired up, to tell us that these are the enemy, to get us to talk to our friends about, well, you know who the enemy is, right? And then you collaborate and say, well, do you say the wrong things about the enemy because you hate the enemy enough for me to be your friend, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I mean, that stuff is toxic.
Yeah, and it's by the way, it's how the real enemies, I think, of our republic fleece us of our cash and resources, And I
Oh
think
yeah.
we talked a little bit about who I believe the real enemies are, the central planners and the globalists and the corporatists and the big oligarchs and the people who, if we were all united and pushing back against some of the things that they're doing, to rob us of our treasury, they couldn't do it. But if we're all off balance and we're all arguing with one another and we're paying attention to things that aren't that important, and they can do it. It's easy for them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's big money in keeping people siloed and tribed up, and yeah, I mean, it's a pretty profitable enterprise.
It is. It is. Same with war. So I wanted to go back, speaking of war, to your comment you made about Pete Hegseth. What did you think, from your perspective, him coming out there and saying, hey, no more fat generals. We're going to return to, good, strong military standards and a, fighting force that can actually, physically wage war. What were your thoughts?
I think it's weird. I thought it was. I think Pete Hegseth in general is is interesting guy, right? I mean, I think he is physically fit. I'll give him that. And I'm a guy that's into fitness, so I
Yeah.
like to
Same.
work out. I thought it was to tongue lash the generals about being fat. I mean, first off, when he said, you know what? I mean, we see fat generals. All right. I look around the country and I see these fat generals. It's not our country. It's not who we are. And I thought, have you seen this country? We're fat as shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
True.
yeah, that's exactly who we are. I mean, I think, look, I think, I was listening to Mike Murphy, who on the Hacks on Tap podcast, a Republican, and he said, he used to work in the Pentagon and he knew some of these guys, some of these like high level officers. And he's like, you're working 14 to 16-hour days, doing pretty stressful stuff at the Pentagon. A lot of times you're not getting to the gym. I mean, at the same time, I think, and I also think warfare is getting to a place where fitness is probably less the key thing than things like AI and drones
Yeah.
and stuff like that. That being said, I think if you're in combat, you probably want to be in good shape. and that being said, I mean, if you're a firefighter, you probably need to be able to carry me out of the thing. So I'm not indifferent to and I think, look, in general, I think we have an obesity epidemic in the
We do.
country, and it costs us a lot of money, and all of our healthcare would be cheaper if we didn't have this problem, right?
Correct.
And so I think fitness would be huge. I also think that Medicaid doesn't cover GLP-1s unless you're diabetic. I think that would be huge. I think because some people are just not going to work out, right? They're just not. Like, I like to work out. I get up at 5 every day. I have coffee. I start my day. I check my email, look at a little news, and then I work out for 60 minutes, sometimes 90 minutes. So I like that. Most Americans don't, right? And
Right.
so I do think there is an obesity epidemic, and I think we have, like, you were talking about the global planners and the people that make money doing unscrupulous things. People make money from making shitty, addictive food, right?
Yeah.
And getting people addicted to processed foods, right? And sugar and things like that. So, look, why I think Pete Hegseth is like, I mean, now there's a guy with more political lives than Bibi Netanyahu, right? I mean, I thought that guy's nomination was dead on arrival, and he survived that stuff remarkably well. And I heard that he's thinking about running for president in 2028. So that would be fantastic. I mean, I think that would be so. Although the guy that they have playing him on Saturday Night Live was Colin Yost, and he was okay, but
Yeah, I don't think he did that great job. But
no.
yeah, I like Pete. Met him several times. We've got some friends in common. I think he's a talented guy. Decorated, war veteran. Has some definite accomplishments in the theater of war that were immediately discounted, and he was immediately lied about in regards to that, where he was just pigeonholed into, this Fox News TV personality, kind of a thing. And I hate the disingenuousness on both sides, right? I do not like it when our side lies about someone. I do not like it when the other side lies about someone and who they are and attempts to mischaracterize or misquote and things like that. I just don't think that that's right. I would like people to return to just arguing about policy and positions and say, hey, we hate this guy because he stands for X, Y, and Z. Okay, fine.
Right.
But let's not just lie about each other's core competencies or things like that. That I think is more destructive and alienating, and again will put us in a position where we're unable to actually have conversation. But I think that you bringing up obesity, yeah, I mean, we have a complex issue here because, yeah, we have been allowing our corporate entities to immorally poison us.
Yeah.
And I'm actually upset as a Christian that there are many of these companies are run by people who profess to be Christians, and most of them know that in exchange for a few more percentages of profit, they have gone to addicting us to their products, or use substandard products, or use things that are legitimately poisonous, and people are suffering the deleterious effects of it. And yeah, it burdens our healthcare, which I've been in the health insurance and healthcare space for many years, and it's broken because it's very it's a many layered problem that just getting people healthier would alleviate.
I mean,
But
number one
man,
killer
it's huge.
is heart disease, right? I mean,
Yeah.
which is obesity for most people. And some people it's of course it's genetic, but a lot of, I mean, just what obesity does, it just causes most of the other conditions, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just horrendous. And
Yeah, I
like I
mean,
said, I mean,
diabetes, Alzheimer's
yeah,
is associated with, I mean, they're calling it type 3 diabetes for a reason. My mom died of Alzheimer's, and it was long, slow, painful process, and her diet consisted of almost zero fat and very, because everything was light back in those days, and then a ton of sugar.
yep,
And it was the exact formula for destroying our brains. Our brains run on cholesterol, and people lie about cholesterol and lie about all these things all the time, again, to manipulate us. And so I do think that we need a healthy fighting force. I agree that it's complicated, but I'm glad that Hegseth went out there and shamed them a little bit, because the standards have fallen so badly. I don't care if it's drones and AI. We should have standards for the way people, dress and behave and carry themselves. We've lost so much of that in our culture.
Yeah, and I mean, look, the IDF seems to have pretty good standard. I mean, I look at the IDF. I was watching this Instagram reel, these IDF guys working out. They were stationed in Gaza, and these guys are. If our military were like these guys, they'd be very and the gals.
Yeah.
There's these women in the IDF are I would not mess with these ladies. Gal Gadot, former
Yeah. Yeah,
IDF.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
again, fitness levels are important because also, I think you would agree with me, a fit body, promotes a fit mind as well. An unhealthy and sick body can be, dramatically deleterious on the mind as well.
There's a book I'm rereading right now by Richard Rohr called Breathing Underwater, and it's an amazing book. I'd recommend it to any of your listeners. But he says this. He's talking about. It's basically he's had a lot of dialogue with the 12-step community, and he's a Franciscan monk, and he sort of this book is him putting in conversation the gospel with what he sees as sort of its integration with the 12 steps. But he says this: to finally surrender ourselves to healing, we must have 3 spaces opened up within us, and all at the same time: our opinionated head, our closed down heart, and our defensive and defended body. I think that sentence, man, it's the head, heart, and our bodies. And I
Yeah.
do yoga every morning, at least 10 minutes. I try, if I have time, I do 20, 30 minutes. And it has been transformative for me.
I
Just because
love that. A movement practice every day,
uh,
is really amazing.
after I work out, I do some yoga and I feel it. The breathing, the fit, like just your body gets defended, right? The anxiety and the hypertension, and there's that book about trauma. The body keeps score, right?
Yeah, body keeps a score. Yeah.
It's in the nervous system, man, and you got to do something with that. And body movement, yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah, I love that. See, gosh, yeah, every day, every time we talk, man, you're getting closer
Absolutely,
and closer to my side. That's what it is,
absolutely, absolutely. Donald Trump, by the way, I will say this for Trump. I played golf in college. I've on and off. I've been a pretty competitive golfer in my life. Amazing to me that a guy that is that not fit and not active physically generates that much club head speed. And at his age, I mean, that guy can still muscle the ball. Like I watched videos of him swinging with some regularity because I find golf swings very interesting. I mean, it just shovels the ball. Like he makes such good use of his body weight in that golf swing. It's fascinating.
Yeah, that's interesting because people on the left, want to hammer him about everything and anything, and including his golf or whatever. And I think that's again, we talk about a dishonesty in that. So I appreciate the honesty of looking at it and going, "Hey, man, what he's able to do with that is pretty
Like,
extraordinary."
it's in late 70s to hit a ball that far.
Yeah.
Even if you're a big guy. I mean,
Well,
that's a lot of club hit speed.
he's actually an extraordinary guy when you think of his energy levels.
Oh yeah.
Joe Rogan came out the other day and said something about him being kind of the final boss for the left, because he's been so unstoppable and unflappable through, all that they threw against him. And I think whether you like him or not, whether you think he's a, horrible character, immoral, whatever you want to levy against him, he's contrast him with what, Joe Biden was like at roughly the same age. One, had to be, going to sleep at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, in order to function. And that was a open secret in the White House, how diminished, he was and how, physically robust, President Trump really is. I mean, most people cannot keep up with his schedule. So,
Oh,
I mean, that
absolutely.
alone is pretty extraordinary.
No, the guy is very high energy. By the way, I think that the media, it will be a long time before the media is forgiven, if at all, for the role it played in that cover up.
Yeah.
Because as it comes out, and I think, and look, I'll be honest here. I think some of these people are doing a mea culpa, and some of it is honest, but some of it is disingenuous because they want to have the right to throw this at Trump, right? And
Yeah.
so they're saying we shouldn't have done it. It's sort of like, well, we can't do it again.
Well,
I mean,
Jake,
it was pretty terrible what was done.
yeah, Jake Tapper comes to mind where he's now pretending like he was surprised and didn't know. And wow, the wool was pulled over my eyes. Speaking of eyes, I had eye surgery the other day, so I'm not wearing any makeup. I just look like I've got two broken,
I'm not
uh,
wearing any makeup. I could have worn makeup.
broken eyes here. But yeah, Jake Tapper, was one of those that's super disingenuous. The guy knew, and now he's trying to pretend again. I think you're right in calling it out that they want to be able to levy some of that stuff against Trump. And well, we can't let this happen again. The wool was pulled over the American people's eyes.
Yeah, some of that is so disingenuous, right? I mean, it's just, and this is part of what I like. Right? I mean, like, let's call out. I don't care whose side it helps. Let's just be honest, right? And
Yeah.
and what happened? If the Democrats want to know why Trump got reelected, just go to Biden. I'm not saying that Trump might not have won that election, right? But I think had there been a vigorous Democratic primary and a more formative. First of all, I don't know that Kamala Harris would have made it through a vigorous primary.
She would not have.
She might have.
Oh,
I mean, but I don't
think that there is no chance on earth because she was. I mean, look, Hillary Clinton was a unlikable person as a human being on the campaign trail. She was not liked by people. Her husband was, right? Bill Clinton was liked. Bill Clinton was charismatic and friendly and
remarkable. Yeah.
yeah, and so is Trump, by the way, behind the scenes. Trump has an otherworldly charisma like Bill Clinton did. And
Absolutely.
I, begrudgingly give that to Bill Clinton because I didn't like him for a bunch of other reasons. And I didn't like the Clintons in general, but Hillary was unlikable. But compared to Kamala Harris, I mean, Kamala could say nothing. She would open her mouth and nothing smart would come out, in my opinion. She would.
Yeah, and she got blown away in Iowa. She didn't make it through Iowa in 2020 for a reason, right?
She didn't even get 1%.
And the thing that shocked me about that campaign was that when Tulsi Gabbard did her in, right? When she just, I thought this is going to be the question everyone's going to ask her, right? She locked up a lot of black guys on drug that didn't need to be locked up, right? They needed treatment.
And she bragged about it.
Yeah, and that was playing politics as an AG, right? As a prosecutor and AG, and I get it, but you have to have an answer, right? And I can't. I don't know if it's her or staff. You have to know this is the first punch they're going to throw at you, and you have to have a really good answer. And to not have an answer for that,
there's people who have tremendous talent in terms of responding on the fly, very quick. There's people that are just naturally witty and quick. There's a comedian that's all over right now in his clips, Matt Rife, who almost all he does is crowd work, right? And he can just so quickly respond to whatever's thrown at him, funny, cheeky, hit it. And people go to his shows just to watch him do like 2 hours of crowd work, right? And he's incredible. Some people have that. Donald Trump tends to have that. Now,
absolutely.
Kamala Harris, the reason that she did not go on the Joe Rogan program, and Joe released all the, hey, look, this is what we said. We were willing, right? They acted like, Joe was interfering and not letting her on. But the truth is, had she been on in any long form situation whatsoever, she would have fallen apart because there was nothing there beyond her bullet points because she's just doesn't have that style. And there's plenty of politicians on both sides that don't. There's people like Pete Buttigieg, who I cannot stand. I think he's completely incompetent. I think he was a terrible mayor. I don't think there's anything to laud about that guy. But man, can he fast, witty, speak, address things, push back on things. He's quick. Gavin Newsom is incredible with it too.
Yeah. And I also think, aside from those weaknesses that you're citing, I don't think, and this is, I think, also a strike against Gavin Newsom as a candidate. I don't think winning statewide office in California is a great qualifier to be president because I mean, look, my governor, for instance, Josh Shapiro, I think would be a formidable candidate. Why? He has to get Republican votes in Pennsylvania. You're
Yeah,
not
and
going
he
to get
would have been a
elected with
lot
a
he would have been a lot better on the stump. He would have run circles around Kamala Harris, and it was the Jewish thing at the time that, kind of torpedoed him, and I think that that's going to be a problem in the future, for him as well, because we've got this heightened, sense of, antisemitism that bums me out, that's kinda happening all over the place, but
acute on the left,
he
very
could
acute
speak.
on the left right now. Very
Yeah.
acute on the left, and it looks
Well, it's
different than anti-Semitism on the right. Right? It's interesting because it looks different if it's like if it's a Proud Boy or something like that. Like it sounds a little different, and on the left it sounds different. And it's always I don't have any problem with Jews, and then you go into
I'm just
these
asking
Rothschild,
questions.
well, and then you start going into these Rothschild like conspiracy theories, and then it starts with Israel, and then you go into these conspiracy, and it's just you can't believe some of the stuff you hear. Right? I mean, I live in Philadelphia, and it's pretty which is a pretty liberal city, and you can't believe the anti-Semitic stuff you hear in progressive, and people will say in polite society. I mean, it's remarkable. I was
Yeah,
at a
yeah.
party a couple of nights ago, and I was talking with someone who was Jewish, and we were dancing. I mean, we were just talking about this kind of stuff, and even we were kind of dancing around it because we didn't know who was listening in, and we were just sort of like, uh, we were talking about just how much anti-Semitic awful stuff we hear in social circles in Philly all the time now. You just it's I'm not saying it's everybody, but but it's more than you would think, and it's acceptable. I mean,
Yeah,
in
it's like
certain
open
circles.
season on it right now.
Yeah,
And again, they're doing it under the guise of, well, we're just asking questions. And I've said a bunch of times, I mean, we could certainly criticize the secular government of Israel. We can certainly criticize
sure.
individual Jews, or even, I have a problem with what some of the Jews did in Hollywood, and some of the things that they've promoted and things like that. You can criticize people, but that's very different than what's going on, where people are imagining that there's Jews lurking around every corner, and
Right,
no,
right.
no Jews, no news. I mean, almost every person who's engaging in that right now will draw conclusions that always lead to somebody Jewish. And it's like, hang on a minute. And I have been called Jewish multiple times because I've defended things. I've been told that I am getting paid by Mossad for my show. I mean, like all kinds of absurd
Hey,
things.
where do you if you're getting paid from Assad, tell me how to get Assad money. I'm gladly.
Well, that's what
I've
I
had
started to
many
say
Jewish
is
guests. Yeah.
I
Where do I
yeah,
get that?
I wanna cash some fat checks, let's go. No, but I mean,
Absolutely.
it's absurd right now, and by the way, I mean, I'm embarrassed to say there's people that I considered friends that are engaging in it right now, and it's disturbing for me to see and to
Yeah,
watch.
it's coming out on the right now. I mean, it's
It
interesting,
is.
right? Mark Levin calls Tucker Carlson now Tucker Carlson. But it's interesting. Some of the voices on the right now that it's wild the stuff you hear them say. And Scott Galloway, by the way, who does a great podcast called The Pivot, and he was on Morning Joe, and he made a great point the other day. He said, the the civilian to combatant death ratio is lower than we had in World War II. It's lower than
In
we
all
had
of
in
history.
Iraq. It's lower than we have in Afghanistan. It's lower. So what is it why are we saying terms like genocide? It's because Jews are not allowed to prosecute a war. They can defend themselves. Like the wider media will go along with, okay, they got attacked. They can push back. But once they actually prosecute a war, there's this advantage. Well, we can't let Israel, we can't let Jews do that. I mean, we'll allow them to defend themselves a little bit, but we won't allow them to do. If we had, I mean, I ask friends this all the time, who, and if they're listening, I don't know who listens, but most of my progressive friends aren't listening, so this is great. But I'll say this: look, if Mexico elected a jihadist cartel to run Mexico, and they went into Texas and killed equivalent of killing 30,000 people, then took the freshman class of SMU hostage, we would make a parking lot.
Yeah,
we wouldn't be showing this restraint the IDF shows. I mean,
correct.
Mexico would not exist anymore. It just would, it would be over. I mean, so this is an incredibly measured response. Now, again, it people die in war, and when Hamas sets up in civilian tenements and hospitals and schools, it's going to be horrible. And have too many children died? Absolutely. I mean, war is awful, but the selective sort of genocide accusations and all this, it's dishonest. It's anti-Semitic, and it's disgusting.
Well, yeah, and there's guys. I mean, comedian Dave Smith and others that they hide behind that idea. Well, I'm just asking questions. I'm just
Right,
you
right,
can draw
right,
your
right.
own conclusions. I'm just saying, and I
Right.
just think that kids shouldn't die. Kids shouldn't die. Of course, kids shouldn't die. But I've not heard him once talk about the Christians that are being murdered and persecuted to many times the number of the Gazans right now, currently in some of the
Nigeria,
African countries.
yeah,
They're not mentioning all of the slaughter of those babies,
yeah.
and again, and then he also disingenuously claims like, and I'm Jewish, and there's a little bit less of that there than he pretends. And so I think that guys like that who are promoting a lot of that stuff, or Candace Owens, who I have had some private issues with for years, is really going off the deep end on a lot of these things. And all of a sudden Charlie was murdered by former Jewish donors and Mossad and things like that, and they're pushing really, really hard down that, and they're taking some grains of truth, like some of the internal pushback that came from a very small number of donors to TPUSA were Jewish donors who did not like Charlie, having anybody like Dave Smith up on stage to debate someone else on these things. And I think that we should be allowed to talk to anyone, and we should be allowed to push back on anyone, and we should be allowed to have open dialogue and discussion, and it's not something that we should be controlled by really any donors on. And that got mischaracterized. Some of Charlie saying that he's got hey, he gets pushback from time to time, to all of a sudden Israel saw that and decided that they better take Charlie Kirk out. Come on.
Yeah. It's insane. I mean, it's just insane. But again, it's not far from, some of the stuff is not far from like the elders, the protocols, the elders of Zion stuff, right? I mean, this is just old school anti-Semitic stuff. It's crazy that
it has echoes of all
yeah.
the same things of the past.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's frustrating. So, I wanted to chat with you a little bit about the kind of the spirit of political violence that's been really bubbling up. I mean, it's been a few years in coming, and I called it out years ago that it would go this direction.
Yeah.
But right now, the far left is really wanting to deflect by saying that it's the right that has committed the violence, and I want to get your thoughts on all of that, and let's talk about kind of what's been happening in the news on that.
Yeah, I actually just did a podcast about this with my friend Bill. We do this podcast called New Persuasive Words, and like I said, he's a pastor in Vermont, and can't believe how many people he actually had in church 2 Sundays ago in Vermont. Man, I didn't know anybody went to church in Vermont. But I mean, if you want to do real missionary work, you don't even have to go to the 1040 window. Just go to Vermont. But there was an NPR Marist, a new NPR Marist poll that came out last week, and which is a decent poll, and they had it showed that a third of Americans in this poll thought that political violence would be required to set the country back on track.
Right.
Now it tracked out basically even. In this poll, it was 31% of Republicans, 28% of Democrats, which is, it was, basically even. That's remarkable, right? That 1 in 3 Americans think that some form of political violence will be necessary. I think it looks different on the right and the left. I mean, I think that, and first off, I think a lot of these people also don't track, so I think some of the I think when Jimmy Kimmel came out and said this was MAGA or something, which he obviously was wrong. But I don't think these guys. I mean, this is just a weird guy who's living with someone trans. Who doesn't come. He doesn't seem socially embedded in like leftist circles. He's not a conservative. He's kind of weird. I think a lot of these people are out there, right? So I don't. Yeah, I think the political violence stuff is horrendous. And I think the rhetoric is problematic, right? I've pushed a lot of friends on this on the left. Saying, look, when you say Trump is Hitler, when you say these folks on the right are Nazis or fascists, then I've said to them, why aren't you celebrating Charlie Kirk being shot? Because I mean, wouldn't you? If I also have my friends that say we're in Germany in the 1930s. Sorry, then why aren't you involved in violent revolution to overthrow the government? If that's where we're at, right? If everyone's going to say the Germans, the problem was quietism, right, and ignorance and denial, and not stopping Hitler. And so I always say, well, then you either lack the courage of your convictions, or you really don't believe it, right? That you're just that you don't, So I think that I struggle with that a lot when people that make also I think it's unfair, like when people make comparisons like Trump and Mussolini. I mean, Mussolini read books. I mean, I don't know if that's fair to Mussolini. No,
Nice
but no,
take.
but I also but also I think that language is really dangerous. I think
It
it's
is.
really dangerous to say when we say people are fascists, are Nazis, are Marxists, are this or that. Now, in Mom Donnie's case, might not be completely unfair to say it's a Marxist, but
Yeah.
no, but I mean, I think this sort of rhetoric matters, right? And I think that when you use this kind of rhetoric, it's not a far cry to then political violence. But what worries me is 1 in 3. No, 70% still say it's unacceptable, which is good. I mean, the majority, but 1 in 3 is a lot of people. To say, maybe more of the stuff, maybe more shootings, maybe more political, maybe more bombing of, shooting at ICE facilities. More that's incredibly scary.
Yeah, no, and I agree. So I mean, I think I've said for going on 10 years that we would get here, because when you start telling, number one, on the left, there was this, statement or sentiment going around that words are violence, right? And I remember
Right.
arguing with left wingers back in the day, and maybe I said this on your show, but when you say that words are violence, engaging in actual violence becomes self-defense. And I said they are going to move in this direction. And as long as we are, using rhetoric like, the right and MAGA, they're fascists, and Donald Trump is literally Hitler, which they say online all the time, then why wouldn't you kill Hitler before he, starts murdering everybody, kind of stuff, right? And you're right. I think a lot of maybe your friends and the reasonable people, might go, yeah, but at their heart of hearts, not really believe it. I wish those folks and the reasonable folks would, just have conversations about, hey, we don't like this policy, we don't like that policy, we think this is dangerous, we don't think that we think that this leads to bad stuff, right? But you know what? It's interesting because I've had conversations. One of my friends, said it in a way that I really liked, about, hey, we've got 3 choices. We can return to the free representative republic that we always hoped for and our founding fathers established. We can have our authoritarian in charge, or we can have their authoritarian in charge, right? And he said, no, number 1, that's what I would prefer. Number 2, I'll accept and live with. Number 3 means war, right? If you're on the right. And his thoughts there were, kind of concluded by, oh, and by the way, Lincoln was our authoritarian. I think when you let things fall apart to a certain extent, there is a heavy-handedness that I think is necessary to, get things back on track. Now, I'm not arguing for political violence, but I think that's what people are thinking on the right when they say, yeah, I guess it's acceptable. The tree of liberty, has to get watered by blood every once in a while, sort of a thing, right? And there's people that I know that look at that and go, oh, maybe it's inevitable. Um, but I look at it and say, okay, there is a time right now, the heavy-handedness that's going on right now, let's say with ICE and some of the, federal resources being moved into Chicago or some of these places. Number one, you have paid agitators on the other side, and I can prove that, and we know that. And I sit on the board of the um, Center for Security Policy that is a think tank developed in Reagan's era that analyzes the existential threats to the U.S. And we have a very clear evidence of what Antifa and the folks that are in that kind of sphere are doing and how they're getting paid and where that money's coming from, so that they are going and pushing for what is ultimately the aim of a lot of the folks that are paying them is they want that destabilization we talked about earlier. They want open borders. They want the flow of low wage, workforce. They don't want really borders. They don't want a strong and sovereign nation. So let's undermine that in any way we can. Let's put these meth heads out there dressed in black bloc, standing in front of ICE facilities, and let's let them get shot with rubber bullets and highlighted on, social media. And so Trump is like, we're not going to allow that. We know these people are getting paid, and they do know, and there's some intelligence services and people that are dismantling some of these networks and going after it. That's why Trump declared them as domestic terrorists and identifying Antifa as such. But we've got to quit the destabilizing forces. A lot of it's foreign money that's coming in and supporting it. I mean, we're at war in that sense. So we've got to do some things that might seem heavy-handed in order to right the ship. And I'm not totally uncomfortable with pushing the envelope on those things. Some people are, but I can understand the idea on the right that, okay, we're going to have to be aggressive. Big brother has to step in now and wallop a few people to establish some order. And we've got all these governors and mayors that are allowing just total sanctuary city kind of things, open air drug markets, all that sort of stuff that has destabilized our cities. So what do we do to put it back in order?
Yeah. Okay. I think a few things. I think.
I figured you would.
Yeah. I don't think that militarizing the streets is a solution. I do think, like, look what Clinton did when he was president. Now, some people on the left don't like this, and and there are excesses in policing sometimes. This is why we have.
I would agree, by the way.
This is why we have body cams now, right, and stuff like that. But Clinton got federal money to put 100,000 cops on the streets. Crime went down drastically, right? I mean, I think that the mayor of Chicago was asked on Morning Joe, yeah, we get that you don't want the National Guard, but what if you could get federal money to put 5,000 cops on the street? And he wouldn't talk about it. I'm like, why wouldn't you just say yes? Yeah, we would take federal money instead of the National Guard. Give us money to hire 5,000
because that's not in their interest. That's the problem.
Yeah, see, I think I ride the subways every day in Philadelphia, pretty big city. With I'll tell you what, I feel a lot better when I see the cops.
Yeah,
it's just one of this. So I think that I don't think first off, we have the posse comitatus statute. I mean, this is something not in our tradition, right? We don't want the military policing us, because the military's job is not to protect the citizenry primarily domestically. It's to kill the enemy. And when they become police, the citizens kind of sometimes become the enemy. And it's it's an untenable thing to put. They were talking about when they put. The NPR did a report a couple months ago when they put the military in LA during the Rodney King riots. They were talking about a situation where the cops were going into this house and they said, all right, cover us. We're going into this house to there's some drug dealers or something. Who was in the house? I forget the circumstances, but there were people, armed people in the house. So we're going in, just cover us. So the military just the guys there in the army just rattle the house with automatic weapon fire. Like, what do you think? What the hell are you guys doing? They're like, we're laying down cover fire. So I mean, when you say cover me as a
yeah, I
cop,
mean that's training, training issues.
So I don't think the military is not equipped for this. A lot of the generals don't want this. So I think it's not, and I don't think Trump instills confidence as a guy doing a lot of this stuff, right?
Well, let me, and hey, that's a fair position to take. And let me ask you though. Okay, what? Because we can identify problems, but what are the solutions? Because you have ICE. I mean, first of all, what maybe you can tell me what your thoughts are on immigration in general from your perspective. Mine is we let too many people in. Okay. We let too many people in illegally, and we have created problems at multiple levels as a result of bad policy for years that now we need to clean up somehow, right?
Yeah.
If they are interfering with federal troops, which are federal agents, which are what ICE is, ICE has a perfectly acceptable job. What would you do to protect ICE agents? I'm sure you're seeing all the social media videos of fat liberal women standing in front of their trucks and things like that. What or rocks and bottles being thrown at them. What would you do?
My algorithm only shows me really attractive liberal women doing that stuff. I don't see any
I
femme.
didn't know. Are there attractive liberal women? Because there's
There's
none on the
lots.
left.
There's
Maybe
lots.
on liberal, I'll give you that.
There's lots of them. The problem is on dating apps in Philadelphia, they all that's serious. I'm not even kidding about this. You'll have these people, these profiles, and they'll say, because I'm single, I'm not involved with anybody. So I sometimes swipe on go on these apps, and there's women, they'll say free Palestine, and then the next thing will be I didn't know what this meant. ACAB. All cops are bastards. I didn't even know what that say. You're more dominant than I am. I was like, okay, that's probably not. We're probably no. I think immigration's a complex thing, right? Because I think what we have is an issue where we want undocumented people here. We vote with our pocketbooks, right? We want cheap strawberries. We want cheap housing. We want you couldn't get without undocumented people in my city. You couldn't go out to eat, right? There's no kitchen that could be staffed. Now, so what do we do about that, right? And I think
and I've got a solution. I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of one thing we could do. Okay, immediately is just say anybody that hires an undocumented person, the first offense is 5 years in jail and all your assets are confiscated, and the second will be 20 years in jail, and no, it would be overnight because there would be no demand, right? And so people, guess what?
Well, I think you'd probably do that with 6 months in jail and a heavy fine. I mean, I think it would
you're
be
left
very,
wing. I'm a law and order guy. I'm an old school Democrat. I'm a law and order. Yeah, but of course you could do, but there's no undocumented problem in Afghanistan because people don't want to go there.
Right.
We incentivize people to come here, and then
we create a magnet.
Right, and then we blame the victim. We say, "Come here," and what we can do is we can deport you because there's 7 more people in line, right?
Yeah.
So we can round everybody up.
Yeah.
Because that employer then can then hire, whether they're a restaurant owner or somebody that's doing lawn services or housing is huge, right? I mean, we couldn't build houses without this labor. So we have to say, what's the deal with because Americans don't want to do a lot of these jobs, right? I mean, there's not a lot of people that want to do the kind of agricultural stuff. Now, that's a problem, but I think on one level, undocumented, there's tons of studies on this, right? Undocumented workers, undocumented immigrants have a lower crime rate than the natural born citizen, right? They just do. There's tons of tons of universities have studied this. And that makes sense intuitively, right? If I'm here and I want to make money, whether send it home, get my family ahead, I'm not rolling stop signs because I don't want to get kicked out.
Well, not just that, I mean, and I think that's a stupid, irrelevant position, not that you are, but because I hear that all the time, like, oh well, then of course we should keep them here
Well,
because I mean you're
I'm
telling
not
me,
saying we should keep them.
oh
Well,
no,
I'm
and
not.
I'm not saying you're
Yeah,
arguing that.
I'm not saying that. But I'm just
Um,
saying they're not a massive threat to public safety, right? Now, they are. Look, you can't
there's a
have
good portion of them that are, because what
some.
you're ignoring is like
Some
the
are.
the
Some are.
the
Some are.
cartel members,
Mhm.
the human trafficking that goes on. There's
Yes,
a whole bunch of really ugly dynamics there.
that's the vast minority. I mean,
I
that's
have I have I have great love for. I mean, great love, and I've got clients that that are in ag and things like that that are in that system is sort of embedded, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I think that there is a place where we can create temporary
yeah,
like
yeah,
just ag visas, like make it as easy as possible, because I'm okay with the people that want to come here and contribute hard work to our economy, right?
yeah,
And send money back home and care for their, and
yeah.
all that stuff. I mean, I think that that's actually healthy, and I think there's a way that we can do that, and have, also, there was a dynamic, and this was Ted Kennedy's fault, but there's a dynamic that changed in our immigration ethos, where it went from it being about strengthening the country to then being all about the immigrant. And that was a mistake, because then we allowed like the fake asylum seekers. We allowed all kinds of special interest groups, allowing special stays for like the Chileans, and the Chileans got involved in robbery rackets and burglary rackets, because there was favorable status for them, and they were sending Chilean gangs here to rob wealthy neighborhoods. And, I mean, it was still is a huge cabal and issue that's going on in places like Southern California. And, there's issues with what we have been doing as far as policy that needs to be cleaned up. But we need to look at immigration as, yes, we're a nation of, I hate when people say we're a nation of immigrants. No, we're a nation of settlers who established this nation, through a lot of really massive headwinds. And then once that was settled, then we, started having good immigration to make us strong. We needed people to come here. We needed people to contribute, and that's healthy.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and look, I don't think it's bad to round up the problematic people and get them the hell out of the country. I don't think that's the problem. I think is so the issue. In theory, the visa thing sounds great and it's very reasonable, right? But people aren't going to do that, right? Like the construction companies, the small construction companies, not going to sponsor, not going to go through all the when there are people.
No, and I'm talking about a entirely different, like
Yeah,
smoothed out, make it easy, kind of a
that
system.
would have to be so fast. Like it
Yeah,
would have to be it was so easy and so fast. That's a problem. And I think and look, the other thing that I think people on the left don't want to talk about. You can't have a welfare state and have open borders. You can't.
correct.
You can if you want to be a libertarian, right? I mean, it's funny. I think there's the Freakonomics did a couple episodes of just talking with economists about all sorts of stuff, and they talked about borders and nations. And there was only one group of people that wanted open borders. It wasn't conservatives. It wasn't liberals. It was libertarian economists, right? No, the conservative economists and the liberal economists had different reasons about borders. But the libertarians were just sort of like, it just doesn't make sense. This labor unit here, I don't care what, they just didn't, they were like Gnostics, right? They just didn't believe in anything physical, right? Like they're a number and they could be working here.
Yeah.
But I think if you can't have any kind of safety net or welfare state or anything like that and have open borders, right?
Agreed.
Because ultimately they're not infinite resources. So those are things that people have to have a hard conversation about.
It's interesting. There's a Democrat. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
There's a pastor, quote unquote. I can't stand this guy. Maybe you know who he is. But Bonhoeffer's child is what he goes by on X. And
I don't.
Yeah, and he's somewhere in the East, and argues for open borders, and really the guy's disingenuous, continuously will mischaracterize and misquote people on the right, It's a game, and he's like, point out where I'm lying. But what he does is just like little sleights of hand kind of things, and most of it's disingenuous attacks, it's positioning, I think that there's some things that I lead me to believe that this guy is
Why I'm on his
paid.
Substack. Why can't I find out who he is? He's anonymous, or like he's
Yeah,
not.
he's anonymous, and he talks about why he's anonymous, because people attacked him, and put his family in danger. And of course, he would highlight and attack people like me all day long, and Megan bash him, and all that stuff. But I think he's a paid shill. But he'll argue from a Christian perspective that we should have open borders, right? Versus having sovereign nations, which I think is supported in Scripture. Borders are not unsupported in Scripture all over the place. I mean, but he again, very disingenuously, I think he says things that are genuinely evil and destabilizing, and very unbiblical on a regular basis. But yeah, he had a big X account. I haven't seen him pop up in a while, so he might have retired or shut down. But he had a couple of buddies, and they had this little cabal of people who are progressive Christians. But the idea of us having open borders is a non-starter. I mean, it's like not having skin as a human being. It is okay for us to to protect our communities. It's okay for us to have houses with locked doors, and let people in, once we have vetted who they are. And somehow we have to return to that here in the US. And by the way, Trump is doing a pretty decent job. If you look at border crossings now,
Right,
I mean,
the
it
border
clamped down
crossings
to
are
zero.
down. Yeah, and I think the Bible,
And that was the
right?
first step.
I mean, I think the Hebrew Bible, right? If you look at the Old Testament, I mean, nationalism is an answer to an imperial problem, right? So the Table of Nations comes after the Tower of Babel, and so the sort of separating out of nations is looked at as an anti-imperial thing, right? That you have boundaried nation states, and that is the check against Babylon, or what later would become the Persian Empire. These sort of or Persia then Babylon, but or no, the other way around. Sorry. No, the New Testament just doesn't think about this stuff, right? Because they're not thinking about nation states the way, I think. Although you get some of the pictures of this in the Book of Revelation, but I think the early church isn't thinking about its role in society the way the Old Testament does. But yeah, I mean, I think.
Well, I mean, it talks about going and making disciples of, all the nations, and, going out there, and Paul's ministry and others. I mean, we're to evangelize to, to all the people.
But there, when you take ethnoi, there is something different though than nation states, right? Whereas I think the Old Testament has a pretty robust concept of nation states. I mean, there's a place for them in God's economy that's and again is sort of over against empire, right? That sort of the global empire thing is contrary to God's design, and I think that the Old Testament tends to see that as totalitarian, right? When you
because centralization of power, which this is where I would argue, like, your liberal, not left, because what the left wants to do is accumulate and centralize authority. That's what the kind of collectivism.
Well, not just the left. I mean,
communism.
let me read you something recently from what did Trump say recently in that Truth Social? Bam! I have reviewed over 30 statements and posts saying that essentially same old story as last time. All talk, no action. Nothing is being done. What about Comey? I didn't even know Comey had a late night talk show. Comey, Adam Shifty Schiff, Letitia, they're all guilty as hell, but nothing is going to be done. I mean, this is a little centralized. I mean, his relationship to the Attorney General, this is a little centralized power. This is not normal of what we've done with either party. In general, there's been a little bit of a Chinese wall. I mean, not completely impermeable, but this is really, that's kind of I mean, that's different.
Well, I mean, I see where we're honestly arguing apples and oranges here from what I'm saying.
Well, you were just saying liberals always want central control.
Well, I'm saying, well, I'm
Yeah,
making a distinction.
Trump likes central control.
I'm making a distinction between left and liberal, though.
Okay,
I always want to
yeah.
make sure that I'm sincere about that.
That's fair.
Because
That's fair.
liberals, I can get along with. The left, we have diametrically opposed ideals and values.
By the way, do you think it's strange that truth? I love calling them truths though, because I love True Social. That truth, bam! It was like a memo that got into the feed. Like,
yeah, well, but I mean, no, what's interesting? I mean, look, nobody does that better than Trump.
no.
I mean, he gets his ability to make news, get news, push things, make splashes, troll his enemies, all that stuff is really extraordinary.
I mean,
it wouldn't all be my style, but he does a great job.
It is interesting that Newsom has satirized it, because it is funny. I mean, what Newsom's doing now, I don't know if it's a good strategy politically, because I don't think. No, I could be totally wrong about this. I think the next Democratic, providing, I mean, I know they are selling Trump 2028 material in the White House gift shop, but providing doesn't happen, and we have a normal
and that's
election.
by the way, that's an epic troll.
Of course,
I think it's great.
But yeah, providing we have I think the better candidate is the one that's fighting the next war, not the last one.
I agree.
And I think Newsom right now is incredibly popular because I think people on the left feel disempowered. You lose every branch of government. You have a court that you're losing, and is sympathetic to some of Trump's perceived overreachers and things like that. And Newsom gives a little bit of morale building to the troops, but I don't think that's a winning political. I mean,
no, I think
in 2028, you don't want to be the guy that was just anti-Trump.
I hope he's the guy. Because I think he will go down in flames. Newsom is a very talented politician, and I've never met anybody who doesn't sweat when they lie as much as him. I mean, that guy could be such a bold face liar. It's extraordinary. I mean, he moved so quickly to more of a reasonable kind of, look at me, I'm a little bit moderate all of a sudden. When he was the pusher of some of the most extreme left-wing policies ever, all of a sudden he's acting like he's all of a sudden the reasonable guy. He's like a Chunk Uger,
this
young
goes
Turks.
back to what I said before. I mean, this is the problem of statewide office holders in California running for president, because you wind up having to walk back everything that you did. And whereas somebody like Gretchen Whitmer or Josh Shapiro, my governor, he needed Josh Shapiro.
Josh can pretend to be reasonable.
And when you looked at that guy talks about his faith in a way that doesn't alienate religious Americans, in a way most Democrats don't know how to do. Like,
no, I think he's talented.
When he was on Colbert talking about that attack on the governor's mansion, and he was talking about connecting with this Christian fire chaplain and their prayer, I thought, man, this is the club the Democrats don't have in their bag.
No, I think he's extremely talented. I want to go back to what you said though about Comey and Trump's attacks on them, because look, here's the question that I have. All right, Adam Schiff, Shifty Schiff. Adam Schiff is a proven liar. Okay, it's documented that he lied. And he was the guy who was.
We're talking about the mortgage thing, right?
No, well,
are we talking?
That's fraud. Okay, no, I'm talking about his attacks against Trump during the Biden administration. What they were doing about the Steele dossier, the spying on the campaign, things like that. So Adam Schiff was a low-life politician that did not have much going for him, but they knew that whatever they promised him, financial behind the scenes, whatever they did to help Schiff would trot out there and try to sell some of the most egregious lies to the American people, because he was, again, low level. He was the bag man. He was the guy we're going to promote to do this stuff. Lied repeatedly under oath. Comey and the email scandal, with Hillary Clinton, the spying on the campaign on behalf of Barack Obama. I mean, so much of those things tie right back to him. We used to have a little bit less of that, let's say, in years past, right? And I think that a lot of this got ushered in directly under Barack Obama's watch. I think it was intentional. Okay, I'm not an Obama fan, whereas I can respect some of what Clinton did, and I can respect him as a politician. And heck, there were some things that he made that were good moves. Barack Obama and his cabal of miscreants went after Trump for 700 years. Trump said that that one campaign thing, lock her up, and then guess what? He didn't, right? And there was plenty of things that we could probably go after Hillary Clinton and the Clintons for, not least of which would be what they did with their foundation and other things. I mean, there was a lot of, and by the way, there's evil stuff that go on in the uniparty that includes, plenty of Republican grifters and swindlers and evil. And I'm for those people getting prosecuted. I think you are right to say that maybe it's not healthy to, prosecute the wars of the past and, let's move forward. But some of these folks, like, what's his name? CDC, doctor,
Fauci.
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 Thank you. My brain just went soft on me. But guys like Fauci, who illegally promoted gain of function research and things like that, we know that he did. He's been caught red-handed for some of these things. People like that, who, oh, by the way, under the Biden auto pen, many of them, there's been attempted pardons, preemptive pardons for them. There's people that should go to jail for what they did to us.
By the way,
And I think that exists on both sides.
Do you love in the White House that all the presidential portraits of the Biden, they have the auto pen? That's great.
That's
I'm a Democrat. I think it's pretty funny.
No, look, Trump is an epic troll.
No, he's world class. I mean, when I saw that, I LOL'd. I actually laughed out loud. No, I'll say this. I'm not denying that there's some people that should be prosecuted. What I think the issue is, like, when you have somebody that works the Justice Department and they don't prosecute Comey because there's not enough evidence. There's no internet. All right, we'll fire the person. We'll hire my private attorney that's an insurance lawyer, and she'll prosecute him. I mean, that stuff. I just think that stuff where the Justice Department gets so ensconced with presidential fiat. That's just it's stuff Jeff Sessions didn't like, right? I mean, it's stuff that people. It's not the way in general we like our system. I mean, when Obama appointed Comey, he said, "It's great to meet you, but we'll probably never talk again." And that's both presidents, right? If both are presidents of both parties, that's generally the kind of thing. Like, we're not going to fraternize with the Justice Department and the FBI because it just is so fraught with
yeah. I mean, Barack Obama did not follow that. He may have said that, but he certainly did not behave that way. I mean, the FBI at its leadership level was a very corrupted organization that became essentially a administration secret police. I mean, and I know this from friends of mine that served in the FBI. Some of them came out as whistleblowers for some of the things that they were doing and lost their job. There was so much corruption, and I put it not on the liberals so much. I think under the liberals' watch, you guys saw the Overton window move so far to one end, and corruption, which exists everywhere, proliferated. And I think what it meant to be an American and what our republic was supposed to be, and all of these sort of things. Remember when they started calling it on the side of the left, our democracy? They meant it. This is our thing, guys, not your thing. All of this got so corrupt, and I think it is owned by the far left and the globalists that encouraged them so that they could destabilize us for foreign powers and for the centralizing of worldwide powers. And I think Trump is attempting to make that right, because I do think that he loves America, and he loves, because he's been saying the same thing for 30 years. I mean, I don't think he would
When you say
deny
that,
that.
when you say that, so I could, so I think so. I had a guy on my podcast last week. Wrote a book called Nations Apart, and it it's all about the regional settling you were talking about. How basically America is more like the European Union that in its history than it is like Italy or France, right? It's got like 11 settling cultures that
Yeah, agree.
and a lot of our
That would be a fascinating book.
oh, it's a fantastic book. It's I'll text you a link to it. It's great. And this guy, Colin Woodard, is a great historian / journalist. But, you know, when you're talking about like I just lost my train of thought. We were talking about, because I
Well,
was mentioning,
we were talking about the distinct cultures. You were talking about how it doesn't look like Europe,
oh yeah. So
or it
I
looks
don't,
more like Europe.
but I lost my my train of thought around but before we were talking about that, we were talking about the
Well, we were talking about Trump.
Trump. Oh, right. When you said loves the country, right? That's what I was thinking. Because Colin Woodard has done some surveys about basically when we talk about love of country. He's done lots of work on this in his research institute at the university teaches that. Because he's trying to sort of help craft national narrative that everybody can buy into. And he says, there's certain people that when they talk about loving the country, it's about heritage. It's about the ethnic sort of connection to people who settled here and stuff. And other people talk about it. It's about ideas. It's about the Declaration. It's about, Enlightenment kind of liberalism. They wouldn't use those words, but that kind of stuff. And a majority of Americans, he said, do think it's more about ideals and less about just the Pilgrims or something like that.
I mean, I would say that that's the conservative position. It's
right.
about life, liberty, pursuit of
Right.
happiness. What
Right.
we can do here in America.
Exactly.
Right.
I don't think Trump loves that part of the country. I don't say that like to morally judge him. I just don't think he understands it. Like I think like when Laura Ingraham, right? This isn't an unfriendly interview when she's in the White House and she says, "What's the Declaration of Independence? What's it all about?" Well, it's a document of unity and love. I mean, it just doesn't. I think if you asked him, like, "Hey," so I'm reading a book right now. The president of the Constitution Center is coming on the podcast next week. Book called "The Pursuit of Liberty: How Hamilton versus Jefferson Ignited the Lasting Battle Over Power in America." Incredible book. I don't think Trump would know what that's about. Like, what's Hamilton versus Jefferson about in the American story? I think some basic things about American idea. I mean, I remember the 2016 debates when this is the Republican debates. I watched. I love those debates, and I thought Trump was great in them. But they were asking about guns, right? And these liberal moderators are asking about guns. And all the conservatives were like, "You got to watch. We need to watch assault weapon. We need due process too." And Trump just says, "I think you get the guns first and then do your due process." And all the conservatives were like mortified. But I'm like, that's just him being honest. Like he doesn't understand this stuff. Like,
okay. So what he does understand. Let's talk about what he does understand. That I think that does unite us behind him. Is when he stood up there like on Oprah. I mean, he's been saying the same thing for years about how we've been getting a raw deal.
Yes.
We've been the big brother country that's paid everybody else's bills. Everybody's, treated us poorly. Everybody's taken advantage of us. We're the ones that are always left holding the bag. We're always the ones that are taking it in the shorts for everybody else who's not pulling their weight. And I think that what he's talking about is this is a country that was established that could create tremendous prosperity for us all. We could all, come up. Now, what he's talking and speaking to is the foundational values that built that. He likes what it built, but he's not Charlie Kirk. He's not going to, lay out what our founding fathers said in great detail. He's not going to have the all of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution memorized. He's not an autodidact.
I'm not talking about memorization.
But I think he loves.
I'm talking about. I think I'm not saying he doesn't love he doesn't have a certain nationalistic pride in the country, and he's a competitor, right? I think that goes back to his real estate days and in New York. But I don't think he gets the spirit of of the founding documents. I just don't think he understands it. And again, I'm not saying he's dumb.
No,
Uh,
no,
I,
I didn't
I
didn't see
just
that as
don't
an
think
attack.
that stuff's just not
I don't think that
on
stuff
his
is
radar. Like,
as
I just don't think he's.
it,
But I think what you do say, I will say though, what I give Trump credit for, that the left does not understand, and I try to explain this to my friends on the left, and they just don't get it. Right? I think a couple things happen from 2014 to 2014 that give us Donald Trump. Right? You get before this period, we're in neoliberalism on steroids, right? And sort of free market neoliberalism really runs, and international relationships are huge too. In 2008, the financial crisis wrecks our faith in the markets. Iraq and Afghanistan and the absolute boondoggle those things became wrecked our faith in international institutions.
yeah,
And I think the rise of China, in 2004, China's economy was smaller than Italy's economy. In 10 years, it becomes, it's the rival economy to ours, right? It starts on this journey to becoming, what it is now. Those three things all soured people on the neoliberal project and free trade, all these things. And Trump understood that. And the Trump that gets elected in 2016 is the Trump that intuitively just understood all of what I just said. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know if he could get policy. No, this stuff he does understand, right? I don't know if he understands Jefferson, Hamilton. He gets this stuff, right?
yeah.
Intuitively. And we ran establishment people. We ran people defending. But basically, everybody we've run against Trump have been people that are ignoring the three things I just said.
Agreed.
And Kamala Harris was running around in my state in a disruption election with Liz Cheney saying, "Isn't it good? Hey, these things just need to be tweaked a little bit." And so that's
We
what
hated
Trump
Liz
does.
Cheney.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Trump understood, right? And does understand today. And I think the left does not understand, just does not get. And until it gets it. Now in Mamdani, you have something that I'm not a huge Mamdani fan,
Well, I'm
but
glad to hear that.
but he is responding to some of these concerns, right? That people are sort of in this post-globalization, post-international order, post cynicism about democracy. He's at least, there's that side of the left's populism I don't like, but the left does need a populist response to Don. Now, it could come in the form of John Fetterman, right? I mean, I think Fetterman gets some of this stuff.
Yeah, he's kind of a surprising character. I mean, once he really recovered, which I was a big proponent of him stepping down, when I thought he could not execute any of his duties after his stroke. But, he came out and all of a sudden was kind of a fairly reasonable and consistent guy who alienated some of the people in his party because he, on some things, was actually genuinely speaking what he believes and not just going along with, all of the, party line. And so guys like that, I respect. I mean, we
Another
would disagree on
Pennsylvania
a bunch
guy.
of things, but yeah, I appreciate
Again,
it.
you don't get elected in Pennsylvania the same way you get elected in California.
Yeah.
And I lived in Pittsburgh. I lived right adjacent to the town he was mayor of, Braddock. I lived right at the East End, practically walked to Braddock. It's right at the edge of the city line. Yeah, he did great stuff. I mean, he's somebody that now, because of our bias against mental illness, he probably could never be a presidential candidate, just because we don't look at depression as something medical, and we look at it as a character issue, and it's people are legalistic, and I don't just mean Christians. I mean the secular left put the Puritans' legalism to shame. I mean
Yeah, it's true.
the sort of legalism you find on the left. It used to be in the 80s. It was the religious right that were the censorious ones and stuff. Now that has been taken over by the left, and so yeah, but that's the culture.
Yeah. Well, it's wild. So, we kind of went a little sideways when we were talking about the violence issue, and I did I did want to ask, and I don't know, how much time or if any you're spending on any of the social media stuff, but there is a, real push right now to, say, oh yeah, it happens on both sides. And there's a lot of, again, sources and data that is lying, using statistics about it kind of happening on both sides. Are you paying attention to, kind of the narrative that's out there, or, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think it does happen on both sides. I mean, I think the data I've looked at, it actually, if you look at political violence from the 70s on, now we're talking over a 50-year arc, right?
Right.
It, the data I've looked at, which has been from several university studies and stuff like that, it's actually a little more on the right. I don't put a lot of stock in. I mean, that data doesn't mean a whole lot to me, in the sense of, I think right now the climate is evenly distributed, as that Marist poll said, right? When you look at a third of people saying they think political violence is the answer, it doesn't change, right? I mean, 3%, Republicans 31, Democrats 28. That's a margin of error, right? I mean, we'd have to go into all the data and look at like why.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's why I want to just bring this up to you, because I do want there to be some more truth to that. When you look at the data that's being collected by left-leaning or left-oriented sources, in order to, I think, take the spotlight off of the massive increase in the left-wing violence that's been happening lately. In order to try to show
When you say
that.
lately, do you mean like post George Floyd? Because
Well,
that
I think
that
no, starting with George
okay,
Floyd,
yeah,
which, by
that's
the
what I
way,
mean, like George Floyd
yeah,
and beyond.
because
Okay, yeah.
because the BLM riots aren't even included. In the left wing violence column, they're excluded from that, and they're using prison violence among white supremacist gangs in prison as right wing violence. It's just disingenuous when you're seeing, because I think what they're trying to cover up, and I would love to get your thoughts on this, and maybe you could even talk about your feelings here, but they're ignoring the rise in violence that's coming from the trans community and people that are having serious mental health issues, and being animated by the spirit of politics of the day. You look at most of the shooters, the mass shooters and attacks that have happened have been coming from the left over the last few years, and again, using the words of violence excuse, using the trans ideology, and really effed up on hormones and things that are increasing the propensity for violence. I think that there's no reasonable way that we can say, well, it's pretty close.
Well, yeah, okay, so yeah, I think I see what you're saying, and I'll say, so this is from the Cato Institute, though, which I don't think is radical left wing, institute. They would say murders by ideology and politically. This is a study of their catalog of murders that are ideologically and politically motivated, um, excluding 9/11, right? They don't put 9/11 in it.
Right.
They have since 1975. They have 391 on the right. 143 is Islamicism. They're not cataloging 9/11. I think because this is domestic. I think so. 65 on the left, 8 foreign nationalism, 4 separatism, 9 unknown others. Right now, these are pretty. Now, again, this is not counting stuff, right? So I think that's fair for you to say, all right, it's prison riots or white Aryan nation prison riots really fair to put in this thing. I think that's fair. I think what we do with the Black Lives Matter thing is a good question, right? Because there's clearly these aren't it's not a political assassination like Charlie Kirk or something, right? Or like an attempt on Trump. But here there's something that is political fervor that spills into civil unrest, that spills into arson and all this stuff. So I think that's fair. Like, and I think what would be worthwhile doing is trying to get somebody to recalibrate these numbers, factoring in that stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I don't know who would do that. Like, who's
Well,
you know,
I think again, this is where truth is an issue sometimes on both sides, right? We need to get to the truth of what's happening here
yeah,
and why is our society sick? What's going on? Let's condemn some of the ideologies. Look, I don't, I don't know if you've ever talked about the trans issue or wanted to give me your position on that, but we're allowing in real destructive um uh ideologies that need to be called out. It's different. Most of the liberals that I've always been, hey, let your freak flag fly, do your thing, it's between you and God, it's between you and your creator, it's between you and your family, you and your doctor, whatever. Fine, I can get that position, but some of the stuff that's being actively promoted versus just, hey, you do you, is
yeah.
leading to a lot of the destabilization and the issues with people's identities, which is
I
where violence comes in.
I couldn't agree more. I think so. I always I have some friends I'm in a group text with, and one is a conservative Republican for Alabama attorney, and I always joke. I I say I know they say that trans people are less than 1% of the country, but I see they're all in Philadelphia, because when I was all I see every day is trans folks who are usually overwhelmingly not, but usually um, presenting female, that are clearly biologically at some point have been male or transitioning, or
Yeah,
they're not passable, as they would say.
you're
I
right.
I see that all day, every day. I mean, I can't. I was on to the subway and 4 trolleys today, and I couldn't even catalog how many I saw. So I don't think. No, I do think gender dysmorphia is a real thing. I think
Mhm.
it's people that are confused hormonally and with
Yeah,
other.
but I believe
Yeah,
that what you're describing is autogonophilia.
absolutely. I think. Look, I think that if you would have look, when I was a kid, I grew up in South Jersey, public schools, pretty working class. That my parents didn't go to college, but we lived in a little safe small town where we had public schools that were that's one of the reasons my parents bought a house there, because they could afford it. And it was, if my teachers, I believed my teachers knew everything, Gramps. They certainly knew more than my parents, right? You're there in locus parentis, right? If my teachers told me I had gender issues and told me I needed to explore that, I would have done it. I mean, I just would. I would have believed that, because I
They're a
believe
pretty dramatic authority figure at the
yeah,
time. Yeah.
absolutely. So I think there's that there's stuff talked about in public schools that is completely inappropriate and is causing a lot of gender confusion, right? I think that this is not like what we're seeing. This is like I don't know who's listening to this, but maybe I'll get canceled. But I don't think that's more.
Not on my show.
Yeah,
If you
yeah,
post
yeah,
this
right,
on your show,
right,
maybe.
yeah, but yeah, send me, yeah. Uh, but so I don't think that's normal, right? And I don't think that yeah, I think it's happening at rates that we're seeing, especially in places like I live, like big cities like Philadelphia, because of cultural influence. That I mean, there's no other way around that, right? And so, and I think that the Supreme Court. I haven't seen how that case, how the arguments worked out there, because I think they were hearing that case today about reparative therapy, and the woman in Colorado, I guess it was, that she's a counselor who I take it as a Christian, and she's been told that she can't she can't do what some people call conversion therapy, or with folks under 18. That's free speech over 18, but under 18 you can't do it because it's medically unsound or whatever. And so that to me is stuff that I think that we're dealing with a trans with what's going on regarding trans folks. This is just an ideological tidal wave, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's why we see the preeminence of so many people, right? That we just know it's just more than statistically would happen normally, right? Okay, this person
Yeah.
has a chemical imbalance. This person is, or is born with, confused genitals, or whatever. It's happening at a rate that's nowhere near what we think
No, it's
that stuff
impossible.
happens. Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
impossible. I mean, there was an interview with this lady who had 2 kids that were trans. Yeah, I mean, okay, the mother's a criminal then. I mean, the mother is, pushing something,
Right.
I mean, you have a mentally ill mother that created and encouraged mentally ill children. I mean, stuff like that, if they talk about the, rarity in the product, you don't have 2 in a family. It's
Right, right,
it's
right,
stuff
right.
like that that's happening that's really egregious and sick. And um, I've had many detransitioners on my show that, went through that and talked about their experience of being encouraged down the path. And, many of them were autistic young girls that were having identity issues. I mean, I have 3 daughters. My daughters all had, a rough time that happens to all girls figuring out who they are in the world as they're starting to approach puberty. And all of that is dramatic. And they were, cutting off, the breasts of these girls at 15 and, doing this. I mean, puberty blockers, which no, you cannot pause puberty and things like that. And then, we were starting to call it out early. I was in the identity crisis documentary that Daily Wire put out. And I called it out pretty early and was getting people calling my employer, calling my clients, calling my friends, spreading out there that this, Bryce guy, I don't know if you know this, but he's spreading LGBTQ hate online. And all I said was it's inappropriate and evil to tell children that happiness lies on the other side of puberty blockers. And I stick with that because it's proven out that it's dangerous for them and society.
No, I'm with you. I think that this is stuff that you know, Bill Maher did a thing. He does, these new rules segments at the end of our show, and he did this one, I guess 2 weeks ago, called "Let's Make a Deal." And he started off joking. He's like, "Okay, let's make a deal. You guys stop saying there's voter fraud, and we'll admit it's not that damn hard to get a photo ID. You do this, and we'll do this."
I
But he
like
was
that.
he was just talking about um, gender and the and the stuff that people are just one of the reasons he thinks, a lot of people voted for Trump, because I think people are just saying this is just too much. It's too much. It's too far. And look, even if the guy has some authoritarian tendencies, we got to say no to some stuff, and he'll say no. He's the
Yeah,
guy
well,
that will say no.
when they started saying the men could get pregnant, I think that's when everybody started going, "Oh, okay, hold on." Or, men should be playing in, women's sports and, some of that sort of stuff. I think that, the vibe shift started to happen because people just thought, okay, all right, we've gone too far. you
And
know?
I think what happens in these moments, right? I think Republicans beat Democrats with culture over class every time. I
Right.
think, I think what Democrats try to come at in a culture war with is class. And there are look, not that class is a bad argument. There are like Mondani won on it, but uh, because there are real distributive problems, right? We do have, money bottled up at the top of the site. But culture often, just most of the time, it's more primal, it's more real, it's politics is so downstream from it. And I think that, yeah, that people, there are a lot of Americans that are not extreme, right? They're not ideological. They're just saying, I don't want my kid, my girl on the swim team, uh, in a pool with somebody who last year was Steven and now is Samantha, and looks like they can bench 195 pounds at
Yeah,
14. Like that,
it's reasonable.
that's not an extreme position. You're not transphobic. You're
Right.
not, and you're not like a fat. This is not an ideological position. This is something that I think. Now, again, I'm not saying there aren't some instances where things are complex and somebody needs this complex sort of array of things to deal with it. But I think it's not the norm, right? And we lose elections. But, it's interesting. Even Laura McBride, the trans congressman from Delaware, she talked with Ezra Klein about this, about the bullying of people on the trans issue, and she was great. She was actually saying that people are being bullied by trans activists, and she's trans,
right?
And she's like, "This is why we're losing." So this is like, if a first trans congresswoman says, "Hey guys, you got to take it a little easier," you should probably take it a little easier.
Fair enough. Well, hey, man, we've been going for a while. I think I could go with you for
it's a great conversation, man.
Yeah, several hours. But I know we're gonna do this later on again on your show.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'd love to have you kind of on a fairly regular basis, because I think this is important.
I would love them.
Yeah, but I mean, anything else you want to end on? Any other thoughts before I have you plug all your stuff?
Yeah, I will say that a pastor friend of mine posted something about Tim Keller. I was always a big Tim Keller fan, and Keller was he posted an old post from 2021 about how Keller saying that he's always attacked by both the right and the left, and but he really said that I'm not really in the middle. He said that the gospel's a third way. But he said, he quotes this, and I think this is great. He said, "The biblical doctrine is not a middle way. It diagonalizes the alternatives. It subversively fulfills the alternatives. That is, it fully critiques both and yet fulfills the best aspirations of both at the same time, without merely combining them or borrowing from them. The biblical position is not somewhere on a spectrum between alternatives. It is off the spectrum, yet acknowledges the concerns of all the positions." And yeah, I think that there's something very very helpful. Also, he says in the same quote, he says, "The Bible's view of humanity in the Imago Dei is far more optimistic about human nature than Rousseau, and yet its view of human sin is far more pessimistic than Hobbes, both at once." So I think that that's, these conversations are helpful, because I think that that somehow when you start thinking through with a gospel lens on things, that it sort of doesn't neatly fit into any of these ideological scripts that we're getting in the culture.
Yeah, I like that, and I would agree with the essence of that. I had a problem with Tim Keller in some of his kind of recent years before he died, and I thought he equivocated a lot and was very. I think he started to give too many nods towards, socialism and different things. I think that he saw the sign of the times where it was starting to go in a certain direction, and he softened the truth in a way that I think harmed his ministry. And he was one of my favorite pastors. But I think he started to give a nod because he saw that it was becoming popular to, take some more of those middle of the road stances on some things. And there were some things that he should have spoken out against that were dangerous that he did not. And that I was bothered by. But at the same time, I think some of his sermons over the years, some of the most powerful sermons I've listened to.
Yeah.
And I think he was influenced a little bit with some people around him, including his son and others, where he started to soften and not, speak the truth as boldly as a, John MacArthur or Douglas Wilson or, some of those guys that are on the other end of it.
If the standard is speaking the truth softer than Doug Wilson. I mean, I don't know. That's a pretty big swath of people. Now, look, Doug Wilson, wrote the best book on infant baptism I've ever read. So I there's some things. I follow Doug. I'm trying. I actually like to have Doug on my podcast at some point.
I could probably help you with that.
That'd be fantastic, because I think Doug is super interesting. But
he is.
Softer than Doug is not a hard.
No, that's true. That might have been a poor example, but I think that he went, not quite to the far liberal end of things, in the bad sense, but I think he failed us in speaking truth about some things in the Tim Keller way. Let's call it that. I think he was adapting to the culture, and I didn't like to see that. And again, only in his, kind of final, 4 or 5 years, I saw that happening, and I found it discouraging because I thought he was extraordinary as a pastor and just could preach like very few others.
One of the best preachers week to week I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah,
Maybe the best.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, so I was disappointed, but anyway, hey, how do we follow you? And
Oh yeah. So I'm Scott Kent Jones, ScottKentJones. I'm basically all social media, and you can find me at Give and Take. Is my podcast, my interview show. My other show is New Persuasive Words, which I do with my friend and co-belligerent Bill Bohr. And you can find Bill. Lots of conservatives love to listen to the New Persuasive Words podcast to complain about Bill. They usually say, "We still think you're a Christian, but Bill, we can't handle." So if you're looking to, for some cannon fodder, Bill loves it. Yeah, no. So those podcasts you can find Give and Take and New Persuasive Words wherever you find your podcasts.
Awesome. Well, I will have to give more of those a listen because I appreciate you, and thank
Oh,
you for
me
coming
too. Me
on.
too. This is great. This is
Yeah, this
great.
has been fun. I consider us friends, and
Absolutely.
if I'm in the Philly area anytime soon, I'm gonna look you up, grab you
Let's
for
hang out.
Yeah, and likewise, if you come to Nashville or California or Idaho, where I bounce around between, love to get together with you then too.
That would be amazing.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thanks,
Well,
Bryce.
God
Appreciate
be
it.
the glory, and we are
Amen.
out. Hey, thank you for watching or listening to this show. If you are someone who listens to us on the podcast apps, please go to our Rumble channel. Even if you're not going to watch us there, we'd appreciate you hitting subscribe. We want to boost those numbers up and make sure that that channel continues to grow. But again, thank you so much for listening to us.